Welcome to Shul.com. We are discussing Seudos Shalishit, and the question is, do the Chabad in Lubavitch, do they eat bread Seudos Shalishit? So I was fortunate to pray here locally by the Chabad and to teach many of the Chabadniks here, some more observant, some less. So I'm able to see a lot of the customs here that exist in Surfside. Besides the Syrian custom, the Sephardi custom, the Moroccan, we also have the Chabad. So the question is, do Chabad eat bread Seudos Shalishit? So I pulled this up from hidush.co.il, and let's read it inside. Minhag Adbonei Chabad. And this is all taken from one of the sources that are by Chabad. Let's read. Even though the perfect mitzvah is to eat bread Seudos Shalishit, lo nagu admorei Chabad lechol pat. The Admorim didn't eat bread. They had mezonot, they had fruits. The Rabbi here is talking about Menachem Mendel Schneerson ben Hana, Hagaon ha'eloki ha'mikubal Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson. That was the father of the former Lubavitch Rebbe. Sha'achal rak perot. He only had fruits. V'chein hora ha'Rabbi le'maaseh, and that's what the Lubavitch Rebbe said. And tzarich pat, you don't eat bread. Aval tzarich litom esed avar, but you have to eat something, taste something. Betosafot muva. שגם בזמן התלמוד רוב של הציבור לא נזהר לאכול שלוש סעודות בשבת. And Tosafot brings down that most people didn't eat bread on that. לכן ציין רבי יוסי שהוא נהג להקפיד על אכילת שלוש סעודות. And that's why the Gemara mentions there Rabbi Yossi that he was specific to do it, meaning it wasn't common. It was Rabbi Yossi's custom that he did it, and that's why it stood out. We discussed in the Halakha L'Maaseh that you should eat bread, but today we're discussing it from the minhag of the Hasidut of Chabad. ומפורש בתלמוד שגם באכילת מזונות בסעודה שישית מקיימים את המצווה. Eating mezonot is also good. וכן כותב המאירי, מקצת רבני צרפת כתבו שאפשר לעשותה בפירות ומיני תרגימה. So he says from the rabbis of Sorfat, of Provence, some of them did it with fruits and all different other items other than bread. וגם ברוב הפוסקים התירו להסתפק בכך, אין צריך פת ומיני תרגימה עומד לו במקום לחם ממש. So he said, according to the Rebbe of the poskim there of Tzorfat, that bread was not a requirement. לכן משמע ממה שכתוב במגיד משרים, it's brought in the book of Magid Mesharim, which was the angel that came to learn with Rabbi Yosef Karo. שציווה מגיד לרבי יוסף קארו, בא על השולחן ערוך שבסעודה שישית אין אכילה בשתייה, אלא רק כזית תבשיל. And in the book Magid Mesharim, he tells him, you don't even have to have bread. That's the angel teaching Maran Rabbi Yosef Karo, which is interesting. Seudos Shalishit betorat hasod. So according to the Kabbalah, what is Seudos Shalishit? הסיבה. לדבר נעוצה בכוח הרוחני מיוחד השורה בעולם בשבת אחר הצהריים, שהוא כוח רוחני עליון הקרוב לנשמה אלוקית ולא לגוף הגשמי. רבנו בחיה מסביר שלכן את מצוות סעודה שישית למדים מהפסוק היום לא תמצאוהו. So the reason why we have 3 meals on Shabbat is because of a pasuk in Shemot that it says hayom 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 3 times. And so he's saying here, there's in the pasuk hayom today lo timsa'u, you're not going to find ki bezman ze nitna hashpat elokit na'alit beyoter reshit harashit hayim amatiyim betanug kiyem benitzchi hanitet nefesh velo leguf milat lo kemo en. So he's saying here that when it references the 3 times hayom hayom hayom, it says hayom lo on the 3rd one, that you're not going to find it, that it's referencing that from the Kabbalah that this meal is one of a spiritual meal in that time frame. So it says here, Admor RASHAB masbir shebehayom lo timseu shte mashmaniyot. He learns 2 things, the RASHAB. Timseu et bechinat halo gilu bechinat lo bechinat ha'en atzmi. Okay, so he's focusing on the word lo. Hayom lo timseu basadeh, that on the word lo. 2, hayom kelman bizman hazeh, and today lo timseu, meaning today, hayom lo timseu, you're not going to find it in this time frame. Lerov elionot haor hu lo niten lahasaga kayom lachen achshav hu rak me'en aval atem motzim oto la'atid ikar hagilui yeh la'atid. That the gilui of this portion of the soul is in the future, not hayom lo timseu bazeh. Mizeh lamad besefer halevush asmach nashim besouda shishit lo achlu pat. If they didn't eat bread, the Levush says, ela dvarim acharim yatzu yidei chava ki ha'ikar besouda hu achilat neshama b'la guf. Because this meal was ra'avad ravin. It's it's the highest ratzon, but that's talking in the spiritual sense, not in the physical. Very clear, the Tzemach Tzedek says don't do it. And bechinat achila mamash, bechinat lechem. It's not talking about food, it's talking about bread. אלא רק מזונות ופירות, שכן בזמן זה מושפעת דרגה אלוקית נעלית ביותר מעין לעתיד לבוא. וכשם שלעתיד לבוא לא יצטרכו לאכול ולשתות, in the future, when our souls are going to be elevated, food is not going to be required. כך גם בסעודה שלישית שהיא מעין לעתיד לבוא. Just like that meal is a meal for the future, אין אכילה גימורה של פת, don't make it an official meal with bread, אלא רק אכילה מועטה, מזונות ופירות וכדומה. הדרגה הרוחנית של סעודה שלישית היא מעין יום כיפור. So he says here that the spiritual level of סעודה שלישית is מעין יום כיפור. רעבה דכל רעבין. פנימיות העתיק, it says here. וכשם שביום כיפור אסור לאכול, just like on יום כיפור you're not allowed, משום שמתעלים לדרגת רוחנית של נשמה. We don't eat on יום כיפור for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that we're דומים למלאכי השרת, and angels don't eat. שמעל העיסוק הגשמי באכילה ושתייה של הגוף, כך גם בזמן סעודה שלישית, שהיא מעין יום כיפור, אין אוכלים סעודה גמורה, פת, אלא רק מזונות ופירות. Okay, so he makes a comparison of יום כיפור, spirituality, not having to eat. ובלשון הצמח צדק, דווקא בסעודה שלישית יוצאים במיני תרגימה. So specifically on this meal. כי סעודה שלישית הוא גבוה יותר משתי סעודות הלילה והיום. That סעודה שלישית is on a higher level. וכשם שבשבת, שבתון, אין בו אכילה שתייה כלל, מפני שגבוה ביותר. When there is a Shabbat Shabbaton, which is referencing Yom Kippur, there's no eating at all on that day completely, if Yom Kippur falls on the Shabbat. כך גם במנחה דשבת, אף שאינו בחינת זו ממש, it's not that exactly, מכל מקום אין אכילת לחם. That's why you don't have bread. That's the tzemach tzedek. סעודה שלישית בתורת הנגלה. אוקיי, הרבי מסביר שהסידוק לפי תורת הסוד שלא לאכול פת בסעודה שלישית יש לו היתר גם לפי תורת הנגלה. שכן כל מצוות אכילת סעודות בשבת אינה אלא בשביל העונג. All the meals on Shabbat is to have a pleasure. ואין עניין באכילה לכשעצמה. It's not specifically about eating, it's about having a pleasure from the eating. לכן נפסק להלכה שמי שהאכילה מסערת אותו, someone eating that meal is going to make him suffer. אין צריך לסער את עצמו לאכול. You don't have to make yourself suffer to eat. כי מטרת האכילה לעונג. The purpose of eating is to have a pleasure. יתרה מזאת אדם שהאכילה מזקת לו. If a person eats, it's going to harm him. For whatever reason. Let's say he can't have gluten, and suddenly all that's there, it's going to make him have a reaction or get sick or something. שאז עונג הוא לו שלא לאכול. It's more pleasurable for him not to eat, not to eat and have a problem. אין צריך לאכול כלל, don't eat anything. כמעט שאסור לו לאכול, שלא יצא בשבת. Right? You're going to start suffering on Shabbat because you're forcing yourself to eat. לכן מי שאכילת פת בסעודה שלישית גורמת לו צער. If it calls him צער and pain, משום שהוא חש את קדושת הזמן שהוא מעין לעתיד לבוא. Or because he's one of those guys who learned this of Atid Lavo, Yom Kippur, spirituality, and all these things, and that spoke to him. Even if that doesn't speak to him. But he knows that is the truth. And he has no requirement to have bread. If he eats bread, so according to here, if you actually eat bread on that meal, you're going against what you're supposed to be doing. Limud Sodot HaTorah Bizman Seudah Shishit. So he mentions learning. The Admor Muhar writes, Siper Shedachar She'admor HaZaken Hifsik Lechol Seudah Shishit Hare Bimkoma Hu Amar Deroshe Chasidut Bibeur HaZohar. He would talk derashot on the Zohar. Gama Admor HaRashab Siper Shelo Kol Shabbat Hu Ochel Seudah Shishit. Not every week would he eat Seudah Shishit. Lefamim Hu Eno Ochel Me'uma Hu Mistabek Bechazrat Chasidut. And he would just suffice with just teaching Hasidut and Torah. That would be considered his meal. That was actually the custom of Rishbi. Whenever he couldn't eat Seudah Shilishit, he would teach Torah, and that Torah, the Devarim, like Devarim things, words, was his meal. If Erev Pesach fell out on Shabbat, Besodot HaTorah, with all the secrets, instead of having Seudah Shilishit, he would focus on the Sodot. So he went from Seudot to Sodot. If you got it, you got it. He went from a Seuda to the Sod. Okay. B'shalosh esrei hashanim shehu shaha b'me'ara. 13 years he was in the cave. Lo haya lo pat lechem ela rak harubim. And for those who said that Rishbi ate bread on all 3 meals, how did you solve that for 13 years he was in the cave and you only had harubim and water? Haya lomed sodot elyonim be'et shalosh Seudos laset behem yedei chovat shalosh Seudos. He would have kavanot and teach Torah during those meals, and that would be covered for bread because he didn't have bread. Because we do know from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that he specifically prided himself that he did eat all the Shalosh Seudot with bread. Masbir harama mipano, Rabbi Menachem Azia mipano, sheRashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai hechshiv et halimud temurat haseuda, ba'ad rabaya chaviv lo me'od b'mkom haseuda. And he says furthermore, the Rama mipano says there is a basis for teaching Torah instead of having a meal, and Rebbe was very proud of this. Shelimud sodot Torah nechshav kemo sheochel hapeh ha'elyon, that it's not a physical mouth that's eating, but a spiritual mouth, the elevated supreme mouth. Aval me'ir harabi benoged lechol hasibur. But in regards to the entire congregation, af al pi sheyocholim naset yedei chovat seuda shlit b'divrei Torah, even though you could be yotzeh with divrei Torah, tzrichim lezher shelo yistamech al amirat chidushay Torah shel atzmo, but not on your own hidushim of Torah. כי יכול להיות שבמוצאי שבת מישהו יפרוך את החידושים שחידש ואז יבל שמא שלמד במקום הסעודה השלישית לא היה דברי תורה ובמילא לא יצא ידי חובת סעודה שלישית. So don't do your own hidushim, because you could find out later that they're not hidushim or there's something wrong with the way you study. But if you actually pull out from the sfarim of the kedoshei elyon of the previous generations, then you are covered, because those are hidushim amitim. בלמעשה הורה הרבי לציבור להדר לטעום מזונות או פירות וכדומה, and the Rebbe was very clear, you should have mezonot or fruits בנוסף ללימוד חסידות. And that's actually what we do. Let's continue. עוד אומר הרבי, יום שבת קודש מסוגל במיוחד ללימוד פנימיות התורה, that Shabbat is for a day of learning the internal wisdom and knowledge of Torah, ובמיוחד בעלות המנחה שהוא עת רצון למעלה, especially in the time of מנחה, וביותר לכן בזמן זה יש לחזור מאמר חסידות בפני הציבור בבית הכנסת, אך לא לחזור מאמרים קשים אלא מאמרים קלים שניכר להסבירם בשכל אנושי שנקבל בשכלם של השומעים. And so the Lubavitch Rebbe finishes by saying that if you're going to speak about Torah, speak about concept that people are going to understand. Don't get them confused. Don't take them to level 2 where they zone off and don't understand what you're saying. Speak about something simple, something nice. And he does recommend to eat fruits and things of mezonot, and that's kind of what is done a lot in the community here, especially from the Lubavitch, and that is the halacha. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen v'amen.